My PC has started to show its age with its 3600 Ryzen 5 by showing subpar performance in CPU intensive gaming such as Minecraft, Core Keeper, and shows some bad stuttering and 1% lows in more intensive games such as Oblivion Remaster, PlanetSide 2, and Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty. It's also starting to fall far behind a productive workloads such as Blender, Photoshop, and Premiere compared to even lower SKU modern CPUs. So I went online and found a good deal on a 9700X bundled with an Asus TUF Gaming B650 motherboard. The cooler I chose to go with this combo, keeping in mind that I want to experiment with some mild overclocking in the future, was a Noctua D9L. Not the most robust cooler in terms of pure thermal performance, but with my previous experience with Noctua coolers, I know it's going to be extremely quiet, high performing for its size, and also will last a long time with no issues. For RAM, I didn't go too crazy, opting for 32GB of Crucial Pro OC, 6400MHz DDR5 RAM. This should be fast enough to make a big difference when using AMD's Expo feature, which will automatically overclock the RAM to its specified speed and timings. The overall package of this setup compared to my 6-year-old Ryzen 5 3600 with a ASRock HDV A320 motherboard is a slightly bigger package, but also a way more robust and versatile setup, going to 2 M.2 slots compared to 1, and also going to 4 slots of RAM available compared to only 2 on the A320. Also, the VRM heatsinks and chokes look nice and solid compared to the HDV's, well, no heatsinks, which for my use case back in 2019 was good enough since I wasn't overclocking and was on an extremely tight budget. Now for benchmarks. Unfortunately, when I reinstalled Windows, it decided to delete some recordings I had of 3600 benchmarks. However, I do have a few games to compare it with. Then the rest will be just the 9700X on its own. Keep in mind that for these benchmarks, there was no precision boost enabled and no expo enabled to show you guys what this CPU can do without any additional help or overclocking. For our first benchmark that is very CPU intensive is Core Keeper at 1440p at max settings. The 3600 held an average FPS of 197 and 1% lows of around 97 frames per second. However, the gameplay was not smooth as shown in the frame times wide range of values during testing, ranging from 4 milliseconds with jumps to 9 milliseconds, which at times can be very jarring. Now on a 9700X side, we saw an average of 344 frames per second, which is a 75% increase in performance, and also 1% lows reaching 160 frames per second, almost the value of the 3600's average FPS. Also, the smoothness of the 9700X compared to the 3600 wasn't even comparable, as the frame time range we saw was only 2 milliseconds to 4.5 milliseconds, with the very rare drop to 6 milliseconds when going to unrendered areas. A major increase in performance. Now for a half CPU, half GPU benchmark, Oblivion Remastered at 1080p with ray tracing enabled. The 3600 saw an average FPS of 36 and a 1% low of 17 frames per second. The amount of stuttering is near unbearable, with frame times ranging from 26 milliseconds all the way to 41 milliseconds and jumping throughout the whole range the whole time. However, some of this stuttering is probably from me hitting almost 16GB of RAM while only having 16GB of RAM. Although when the game does stop using max RAM, it is still a pretty bad experience. The 9700X not only brought an average up to 53 frames per second and a 1% lows up to 33, but also our frame time variance brought down to 15 to 25 milliseconds. A major improvement in both performance from the better, faster CPU, but also the 32GB of RAM now removing the stuttering of hitting RAM limits. For a purely GPU intensive benchmark, I chose Cyberpunk 2077. Unfortunately, this was one of the 3600 benchmarks that I lost, but I didn't really see or feel any improvement compared to when I had the 3600. In the settings benchmark, reaching an average of 52 frames per second and 1% lows of 44 frames per second, with frame time variance ranging between 16 milliseconds and 21 milliseconds. Also did play the actual game to make sure that still felt the same and performed the same in general, and again, there was no perceivable difference in performance. So was the 9700X a good upgrade? Yes. All in all, I'm not only impressed with its performance, but also how efficient it is while still maintaining a high boost clock and having 8 cores. To put into perspective how efficient it is, at full load multi-core workloads, it hits 88 watts, which when you divide that by the amount of cores it has, which is 8, that brings it to only 11 watts per core. All in all, I'm happy with my upgrade and can't wait to take advantage of this extra processing power in my favorite CPU intensive games and production workloads. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.